Hey, my name is Heather Sloan, and I work with Nightlight and the Post Adoption Connection Center. Today, we are continuing our difficult behavior series, focusing on dealing with stealing and trying to have a fun little title for this one here today. All right, so our objectives for our little lunch hour here is to identify patterns that you might be seeing in your child's stealing behavior, understand how past trauma and fear is driving that behavior, and discuss some practical suggestions for dealing with the behaviors. So I want to talk with us a little bit today about just our views of stealing. And I think it's very important to keep in mind that our American culture very highly values not stealing. We are highly possessive, and that not necessarily in a bad way, but we are clear on what are ours, what our possessions are. We value those. We don't want to destroy our possessions. We are careful with what we do with them, how we give them to others, if we give them to others. And so it can feel exceptionally violating when our children are stealing from us or others. And I bring that up to remember that that is a very high cultural value. Again, that's not a bad thing, right? Of course, stealing is not something we want to do. It's a bad thing to do. But just to recognize that our culture really does put a very high value on this topic, and that may be leading to some of your heightened emotions. And you might be wondering why this issue of stealing with your child is really hitting buttons in you. That might be some of the button. We really value it and taking care of our possessions. And so that can help you just with your own frustration levels and understanding maybe why it's hitting you a little bit more than maybe some of the other behaviors that your child is expressing in your home. So I want to talk first about kind of an older view of stealing, and even from a trauma perspective. And we'll talk a little bit about how there's aspects of this older view that I think are still important to keep in mind. And we'll talk about that later in the presentation. But so much of this older view is focused on the reason for the stealing is that the child wants control. So they're power focused and looking to gain control over others using this as a manipulation tactic. So our response then is always kind of that first reaction is, okay, what's the consequence to stop this behavior? They will learn from this natural consequence, and then this is going to curb what's happening, and maybe even walking over into areas of punishments, right? Where the definition I would have between those two things are punishments are just things that are done to punish the child in hopes that that will deter future bad behavior. Where consequences, looking a little bit more, what's the natural consequence, right? If they steal something, they have to work to replace it. They have to pay to replace it. They have to give their apologies and come to the person they stole from and make it right. Not saying we don't want to do those things, right? Children need to be held responsible. But what I want us to think about today with this kind of newer view of stealing is that this is an issue and a breakdown in self-regulation for this child. That kids from trauma are very poor self-regulators. They did not grow up with parents who regulated them. And they are not kids who have developed skills for calming down their internal stressful states. So they become dysregulated, they become agitated, they're feeling deep emotions, and they don't know how to calm themselves down internally. So they will seek external ways of calming themselves down. And in a lot of ways, their body might even take over to kind of automatically seek external sources. And so what that means is they are receiving, by doing something externally, by doing a behavior, they get a certain reward through that. It sets off those feel good chemicals in our heads, right? That dopamine, that serotonin, those endorphins, we can get a rush of that when we're seeking something externally. And this isn't inherently a bad thing, but it becomes a bad thing when that is going overboard and almost becoming an addiction. That stealing can kind of be viewed as an addiction for these kids, that it is an external attempt at soothing something internally. And so they are continually doing this to continue to seek those hits of those chemicals in their brain that help calm them down. And kind of over time, their body learns that this is what I need to do to calm down because I was never given the tools on how to calm down within myself. So I have to continue to seek out this behavior. Again, just like an addiction where they maybe aren't seeking substances for that escape, for that distraction, for what's going on internally, but it's through this action and this behavior. I want to talk a little bit about that self-regulation progression that is supposed to happen in a typically developed, typically attached child, and why, especially if you've adopted an older child, either through foster care, international, even some of our domestic kiddos that maybe kind of missed some of this regulation cycle when they were younger, didn't develop skills to self-regulate internally. So what this looks like is it first starts out as parent regulation. You have an infant in your home, they cry, right? And why are they crying? They are crying because they have a need that they can't meet themselves. So they're crying out to their parent to come and regulate them. I'm hungry, I cry, my parent feeds me, I feel better. I feel uncomfortable, I feel tired, I feel hot, I cry. My parent comes, meets my need, and I feel better. Right? So the child learns to be regulated by the parent. That's why they cry. And that's why it's so scary when we hear these stories of kids in these orphanages that have stopped crying, right? Because they realize no one is going to come and regulate me, right? But that crying action is a way for them to get regulation from the parent. As our kids grow up into kind of toddler ages is when we start to teach them about co-regulation. You're teaching them how to calm themselves down, right? We're showing our toddlers, okay, let's take a deep breath. Come here, let me hold you. Oh, you got a boo-boo. Let's make it feel better. I'm going to kiss it, put a Band-Aid on it. The parent is, and then the child saying, yes, that kiss made it feel better. Yes, this hug made it feel better. Hey, buddy, let's take a breath. And the child goes, oh, okay. And they're breathing for themselves, but that parent is involved in that regulation. And you're starting to teach them how to do this for themselves, how to regulate. So that as they start to get older, and that co-regulation stage for a lot of kids can really last up even into elementary ages, right? As they start to in some ways learn how to calm themselves down when they get upset. Then we progress into how do I know how to make myself feel better, right? So all of us on the call today, we're adults and we've learned ways to make ourselves feel better. I have mantras of truth, and sometimes that's scripture, sometimes that's statements of truth that I repeat to myself when I'm upset and I know I need to kind of combat against the anxiety I'm feeling or the sadness that I'm feeling. I've learned how to take a breath, take a walk outside, move my body, different ways of taking care of myself, reaching out to a friend to talk to them about what's going on, find someone to vent to because I know that makes me feel better, right? So we've learned how to self-regulate. And then we see even poor regulation skills in adults, right, that are seeking these addictive behaviors, right? This is the way that they calm themselves down, even in unhealthy ways. So that is essentially kind of a challenge I want to bring to us today about seeing this through a little bit different of a lens, and what could be going on with your kids when they're stealing. So I want to give you some questions to ask yourself, both now as you think about the behaviors and the stealing that you're seeing going on with your children now, or if maybe you're preparing for a child coming into your home or your child hasn't quite started showing these, but you wonder if they will. So you're here at this webinar today. Some questions to think about. If you've ever done a webinar with me before, some of these questions are going to sound very familiar. My challenge to families is always to think about anything going on with your child's behavior. What are they afraid of? What are they insecure about? What are they stressed about? Or how are they feeling out of control? Why are they feeling out of control? This little series of questions is so important to keep in mind with, like I said, anything going on with your child's behavior, but especially we want to talk about this today with even with stealing. What are they afraid of, right? If we're thinking about that self-regulation breakdown, that is happening because your child feels afraid, they feel insecure, they feel stressed, or they feel out of control. So they're seeking an external stimulus to turn on those little feel-good emotions in their brain, to help calm them down, to excite them, to make them feel better, right? But that's starting, if we go all the way back behind the behavior, what's causing them to feel stressed? What's causing them to feel afraid or to feel out of control? That's where we need to put our focus. And that's what's so challenging about stealing. It is such a destructive behavior, both to your relationship and trust that you're trying to build with your child. But then also, if they're stealing from other people, they're stealing from family, friends, people at school, that's also affecting you, right? You feel embarrassed about your child's behavior, and that's making you feel really anxious. And so we get easily distracted onto the stealing. We've got to stop the stealing. What do I need to do to stop the stealing? I'm going to put cameras in my home. I'm going to watch them. I'm not going to let them touch anything. They don't get to go to friends' houses anymore because they steal, right? We start to control the behavior, and we completely miss going to, but what's making them afraid? What's making them feel insecure that's causing that? So these other questions here, we want to kind of talk through the presentation today and challenge you to take some time to think and journal through this to see if you can find any patterns in what they are stealing. Because there might be patterns. There also might not be, right? And we'll talk a little bit why that might be. But thinking about what they're stealing and where is that stealing happening. And we'll break this down a little bit here as we go forward. Wanting to go a little bit deeper into that, what are they afraid of? What are they insecure, stressed about, feeling out of control? And really remembering that this comes from their trauma. And even with your domestic kiddos, this comes from the trauma of what they experienced in utero. At a minimum, the stress of the biological parent that was considering placing their child for adoption, right? Something was going on in their lives to make them feel a little stressed out at a minimum. And then also, what was that in utero experience? Did they have substance exposure? Was there prolonged stress going on inside mom's body that is affecting the child? This can have brain impacts for your child so that even when they come right from the hospital into your healthy home, there's still some brain impacts there from that experience. And what that does to our brain and why that matters is because it impacts our emotions and the behavior that is expressed out of those emotions. And so if things haven't been just wired the way that they're supposed to in my brain, then my emotions can get wired and triggered really easily into that fear center in my brain, even from our kiddos that were adopted domestically. So really challenging yourself to think about, what are they afraid of? What could they be insecure about? Try to put yourself in their shoes, right? Get some empathy rolling and think, what could be going on inside my child's brain that would be causing them to seek these outside ways of calming down through these stealing behaviors. Want to look at teaching them skills and tools for regulation. Okay, so that's a big piece here that I think is also missing when we jump right away to the behavioral control, to the behavioral management, to the consequences, to the punishments. We're missing the opportunity to teach them to recognize first that they are lacking skills, and it causes us to miss going back and trying to build those skills and tools for regulation. So maybe that looks like stepping back in to co-regulate them when you are in a stressful place. And we'll talk about where that comes in here in a moment. And I want to challenge you to remember connection over punishment. That they need connection in order to heal from that insecurity, from that fear, from that stress. And your continued connection is ultimately what's going to lead to a decrease in the behavior of stealing, not just the punishments. And I would posit that if you're here as a family because your child's continuing to steal and you've been doing all of these things to try to stop them, it's because it's probably not really working, or it's not being as effective as it could be if we're missing the connection that this child is really ultimately craving deep down inside. All right. And sometimes along with that, our kids can use some of this behavior even in that place of connection, right? That if they are used to connection in their history, being angry responses, getting in trouble, I get attention when I act out negatively, right? Then that is still something that can be solved with appropriate connection with the parent, right? That if they are used to seeking out attention through negative behaviors, we need to look at ways to give them attention with positive behaviors and giving them attention even with no behaviors, right? That we're just upping that connection, upping that attention. And I know that can be really challenging when these stealing behaviors are causing a rift in your relationship, right? It's kind of hard to grow closer and take a step closer to somebody who's hurting you through stealing, right? That's hard, and I recognize that. But finding ways to kind of overcome what's going on inside you, your own fears, your own insecurities, your own pain and emotions that are coming through your child's behavior, finding ways to overcome that so that you can continue to connect with them, because that's ultimately what's going to get you to the place of healing quicker than increased consequences, increased punishments. I want to talk through it because it's kind of just a random collection of just tips and things to remember from the trauma perspective here at the beginning. And so these are just kind of jump around a little bit because your child's stealing could come from any number of places. And that's what I hope to help you today is give you ways to investigate and really look into what could be going on with them. So I want to give a lot of information because every one of these things may not be applicable to you, but they might be to someone else here in the webinar today. So wanting you guys to really focus on how can you create more stability, more security, more consistency, a more predictable environment, giving them more ways to feel like they're back in control, to kind of combat against those negative feelings that's causing a negative behavior. So one way you can do this is to really redirect your own focus back to connection and security, not just focusing on whether this is a right or wrong behavior. So kind of similarly to what I just talked about, and sometimes that's redirecting your own focus, redirecting the way you're talking about stealing. And I give some examples going forward, but instead of it being about you're stealing and that's bad, maybe it's are you seeking connection? Are you feeling stressed out? And so stealing is helping you feel better, right? So you can kind of hear some of the differences in that. And I'll give you some better scripts for that, but just to kind of give an idea of what I mean with kind of redirecting that focus into words and language and actions that focus on connection and security over just focusing on you have the wrong behavior, you need to have the right behavior. We still want to use natural consequences. So everything I'm talking about today is not throw the consequences out the window because those don't work and only connect with them. That's not what I'm saying. But what we often tend to do as parents is jump fully to consequences and skip right over that connection piece. So wanting to make sure that as maybe these natural consequences do need to happen so that they can start to learn some of those lessons, we need to make sure that connection is increasing in the same way. Or really, I would argue even more so than the correction that also has to increase. So we still want to be utilizing natural consequences where those are appropriate and making sure that we're not just focusing on punishments, right? So the punishment is going to be that, you've stolen, so you can't go out and see your friends for 3 weeks, right? Where we give these big punishments where we're removing things away from them, adding things on that aren't really even naturally connected or linked to what happened with the behavior. I think I gave this example earlier, but that natural consequence would look a little bit more like, you stole this or you damaged this property. We've got to work to pay that back. We've got to work to purchase another one for somebody. We've got to go and make restitution through our words and saying that we're sorry and talking with them about how we can make it better, right? Those are some of these natural consequences that we still need to keep and making sure we're focusing on those and not just unrelated punishments. You don't get screen time because you stole something from your brother, right? Maybe if they stole the iPad, that's a natural consequence, right? You've lost screen time on the iPad because you stole it from your brother. But to have those completely unrelated isn't really helping with the cause and effect thinking that we want to focus on, which we'll talk about here in a moment. Now we want to keep in control of our own emotional reactions, right? This, of course, is making you angry and frustrated and scared and embarrassed and triggering all kinds of emotions in you. Understandable, right? This is absolutely natural. So finding ways for you to remain in control of your own emotional reactions to the child. Try to remember that they are not necessarily doing this to you. They are just doing it. They are not stealing to harm you. They are just stealing. Okay. And removing yourself from that narrative that you created in your mind can also maybe help with your own emotional reactions. And we can keep our reactions and our conversations with the child leveled at the behavior and the thoughts and the feelings that are going on and not just coming at the child because we think they're trying to do this to hurt us. They're trying to damage my relationship with this friend, so they stole from this friend. Like, no, they just stole from the friend. And it was because maybe they were at the friend's house and they were feeling really stressed out and unsure of what to do and didn't know how to play, and they were starting to feel kind of crazy and out of control. So they just stole something to get that hit of dopamine or endorphins to calm themselves down. Okay. So it's not really about you. And making sure that we're not making even bigger reactions to make things worse, right? I think a lot of parents can, because stealing's a crime, right? So we can kind of associate in our brain, okay, I've got to get the police involved, or I've got to tell my child, I'm going to call the police if you keep stealing, because that's a crime, right? Where we're focusing on that right and wrongness of it, or especially with threats, what that's going to do, right? If we're recognizing that our child is stealing because they feel afraid and insecure, the involvement of the police is only going to strengthen the fear and insecurity. It's not going to strengthen the better behavior. Okay, so being aware of that, to not get that involved and really wondering why you're doing that, right? Maybe there's a place where that's appropriate, right? That your child's behavior has grown so out of control. There needs to be some of these consequences, but ultimately, I want you to think about, are you turning toward that police option or that escalation option? We're going to get the principal involved, or we're going to go up to the pastor of the church, kind of escalating up to somebody higher than you, as a way to hopefully control their behavior. If I threaten to go up to this level, then they'll stop stealing. We're going to go to the manager of the store, the owner of the store. That's not necessarily going to work, especially if you've been trying that and the child continues to steal, because it's not about that, and that's not being effective. So wanting to redirect you guys really into what's going to be the most effective. We don't want to argue, right? Get into arguments of that back and forth with our children when you know that they have taken an item, when you know that something has been stolen, you're very certain of it, kind of what happened. Then you want to state that very factually. I know that you took this item. This is what we're going to do about that. Here's like kind of the related natural consequence where that feels appropriate. You can even create empathy by wondering, I wonder if you did this because you were feeling stressed out. Your friend wasn't being very nice to you today and you were feeling stressed about that. And so you stole something of theirs, right, to help you feel better. I wonder if that's why this happened, right? You can kind of, and that by wondering that out loud, right, allows them an opportunity to maybe feel safe sharing. No, it wasn't because of that. It was because of this. Or it also teaches empathy, right? That you're saying, I wonder if you felt this way, shows that you're thinking about them. You're thinking about the feelings of others, to model that for them. And you want to disengage out of that argument, right? No, I didn't steal it. Yes, I know that you did. No, I didn't. I didn't do it. I wasn't even over there. I was in another room. I wasn't blah. They start to argue, right? Because they're trying to get out of trouble. They don't want you to know that they stole it. They want to keep that covered up. They don't want to get in trouble, right? And kind of stopping that argument as soon as you can, right? I know that this happened. We can talk about this more later. This is going to be the consequence of that. We're going to talk about it later tonight, right? And kind of disengaging out of that argument, because all they're going to do is get your emotions to start to jack up a lot. And then you guys are in a control battle and an emotional fight battle. And that's going to lead nowhere positive or helpful. I want to remove temptations while you're working through this, right? So if you do start to see a pattern, you know that they're more likely to steal in a certain location or steal certain items. Let's go ahead and remove those away, right? Keep those out of reach. Things that are really high value to you, that have high importance, either money value or just emotional value. Maybe we need to get them locked away in a closet until we get this under control. That when you have friends come over, their purses go into a locked box in your closet. They don't just sit out on the table for the child to rifle through when no one's paying attention, right? So don't set your child up for failure. If you know that there is a weak spot here, there's temptations, this is a behavior that is happening, and you've got some idea of the pattern, then let's remove those temptations from the child to help them remain successful. You don't want to potentially use your own emotions as a way, and I wrote manipulate on here, which sounds a little harsher than maybe what I mean, but sometimes parents might feel like if I tell them that your stealing hurt me, and you're saying that in a way that, oh, that will get them to stop stealing because I want to appeal to their, I don't want to hurt people side, right? But if that's really not where your child's at, and they're not really showing remorse over the stealing, all you're doing is setting yourself up for hurt and to get more upset emotionally because, well, I told you you hurt me and you don't care, right? And then it becomes about, oh, my child doesn't care about my feelings and emotions. Don't even put those out there, especially if the reason you're doing it and the reason you're sharing that action hurt you, it to be effective in stopping their behavior, it's not going to be effective. And all you're doing is putting yourself out there to be hurt by sharing, hey, I was emotional with my child and they just rebuffed me, right? They just shut it down. Then that's making you more upset and adding to your emotional state. I want you to name you could try naming what they might really be feeling, right? And again, we'll do some scripts on this, but I kind of read a story about a mom whose teenager kept going into her bedroom to steal things. And then if he was at a friend's house, he would go into the parents' bedroom and was stealing things from the mom at friends' houses. So mom kind of linked like, okay, these are the common people he's stealing from. And she was able to really link it into his feelings about abandonment from his birth mother. She realized he was stealing anytime that she was gone from the home. And so realizing, hey, this could actually maybe be a trigger for my son's abandonment. So she named that to him. Hey, I've noticed that this behavior is happening more when I'm gone from the house. And I wonder if that triggers from some fear in you because your biological mom left and now I've left the house, and if that's maybe related. So anytime that you feel scared about that, you can go into my room, just go crawl up in my bed, go curl into my bed, go look at a picture. She gave him alternative things to do when she was stepped out of the house. And it stopped the stealing behavior pretty quickly because she redirected him. She understood it, named what she thought was going on. The child realized that was happening. And this was with a teenager, right? This wasn't just a young child. This was an actual teenager, like an older kid that was willing to kind of be that vulnerable and recognize their behavior connecting to these emotions from their biological parent. This could be related to a poor self-image. So if the child feels very negatively about themselves, they feel like they're bad, then they're going to do bad things, right? I'm a bad kid, I'm a bad person, so I can just go ahead and keep doing bad things. I need to feel badly, so I'm going to do bad things and continue to feel bad. Right, so being aware of the susceptibleness our adopted kiddos are to that negative and poor self-image, how quickly they internalize anything that happens that's negative, and it's because I'm bad, there's something wrong with me. And if you've put so much attention on the behavior and the stealing, and you're doing this bad thing by stealing, and this is bad, but then that child internalizes that, then they can also start to feel like, well, I'm just bad all the time. So why should I stop stealing? Because I'm just bad. So I'm just going to keep doing bad things because they can't see that I can do anything right. Right. So watching the way that you think your child sees themselves, and then how any of your words or actions could be adding to kind of that negative or poor self-image. Okay, and then there can be a lack of cause and effect thinking. So I want to go, as a good little social worker, I want to go into some theories here. So we, a lot about child development, right? We hear about all kinds of different ones with emotional development. We hear about Erikson. So this is Kohlberg's moral development. And I think why I'm bringing this up and why I think this is really important is you want to think about not only the chronological age of your child and where they might fall in this development of moral ability, but also what is their developmental level, right? You may have adopted a 13-year-old that acts a lot more like a 4-year-old. So we want to think about our children's history, if you're foster kids or your internationally, your older adopted children, they maybe didn't have a healthy relationship and a parent in those first, birth to 6 years of life, where they would have been learning more about this cause and effect type of thinking. So if they missed that, or they're currently in that stage, it's trying to appeal to a higher level of moral development isn't going to work when morally developmentally, they are much lower, and we need to be teaching something on a lower level. They may have no connection between causes and effects, or even earlier of that, you don't want to do this, don't act like this because this hurts people, right? When that's really more of a post-conventional level of development. And if they're, 8, 9 years old, then that's not going to be motivating to them to want to stop stealing. It's because it hurts other people, and it doesn't work in our society, right? On the societal level, their brains haven't even gotten there yet. So you want to think about the way you're also trying to appeal to your child, and is this falling in line with where they are morally developmentally, if that's really right, if that's the right term. So this pre-conventional stage, generally for children under 6, is where that cause and effect and rewards-based motivation is going to come from, right? am going to learn. So the moral, right? Doing the right thing, right? Is kind of the basic way of talking about that, right? Doing the right things, right? So the right thing would be not stealing, right? So they're going to learn that through, oh, this is the cause and effect, that when I steal, here is this punishment that happens, or here's this consequence that happens. Or at this age, they're learning, hey, when I don't steal, or when I give it back, then I'm rewarded, right? There's a lot of reward based learning in our moral development in this stage. And then when you get up to a conventional level, this is where kids start to focus on the good. I want to be a good boy. I want to be a good girl. Want to conform. This is covered up, and conforming by avoiding the disapproval or dislike by others. Conforming to, the censure by authority. So again, what I said earlier, like getting the principal involved, or the owner of the store, or somebody higher up. If you're dealing with a lot younger age child, or a child whose moral development is much lower, then that's not going to be effective, right? So that's why I want to bring this up, to just think about. And I know you may not know everything about this moral development model. You don't have to, but the point being is recognizing that there is a progression of development for children when it comes to morality, and to recognize that we're coming to them from a post-conventional adult perspective of our own moral development, shaped by our entire childhoods, our faith beliefs, our values, so many things, right? And then we try to apply that adult level of moral thinking onto a child that is too young for it, or does not develop those skills. So you might need to come all the way down here to step 1, step 2, even with your 13-year-old, to be able to start to build them back up to where they should be, and understanding the morality potentially that's involved here in stealing. If this is a little bit different than they're stealing because of stress, because of insecurity, right? But so this is like when we're evaluating and investigating into what is the cause behind my child's stealing behaviors and what's going on inside them. If there is a moral argument to be made to what they're doing, this can be helpful. Okay. So another question that I posed to you guys a couple of slides ago, what are they stealing? So thinking about and seeing if there's a pattern. Often, and I would almost say most often, there's no pattern. There's no significance. There's kind of really no rhyme or reason to what's being taken. And that's, again, because of that, they're seeking a psychological and physiological payoff for what they're stealing. They aren't stealing an item they want. They aren't stealing an item from their sibling to hurt their sibling. They're stealing an item because they feel stressed out about their sibling relationship, and it feels better and it makes them feel good to steal something because it sets off those brain chemicals, right? And there's really no rhyme or reason for it. And the example I worked with the family, she had taken their child to visit some friends, and this child stole the iWatch of the parent in this household that they went to visit. She stole it, and then once they kind of realized she stole it, they asked her what she did with it, and she had just thrown it away in a random trash can, right? She didn't steal it because she wanted the iWatch. She didn't steal it because she thought it was cool. She didn't steal it because she didn't have one, and she's mad at her mom for not getting her one, so she's stealing it from somebody else, right? Which is where our brains often go with stealing. Oh, she wanted it. She wanted to hurt somebody with it. No, she just stole it. That made her feel better, and then she just tossed it in the next trash can that she could find. Right. So there's not always a significance or a reason, and that the pattern is simply the stealing action, right? And it's not so much what or where, right? So wanting to kind of challenge you that very often there's no significance to what it is that they're stealing. However, there could be a pattern, right? So I know I'm being very helpful today, right? But sometimes there can be a pattern to what they're stealing and why that might be. So to challenge you to think about, what are the items that you know your child has stolen, what you know they're tempted to stealing? Is there any commonality to it? That could be helpful. And the reason I'm challenging you to do that is to get you to the why. What are they insecure about? What are they afraid of? Why are they feeling out of control? What are they feeling stressed about in that moment, in that setting, in whatever was going on, right? So just challenge these kind of questions to examine the bigger picture surrounding the incidents of stealing, instead of what the stealing behavior does is make us focus just on they stole and I'm so embarrassed that they stole from my friend. I can't believe this happened. Took that watch and then they just threw it away. Oh my goodness, I'm going to have to pay to replace this with my friend. What if my friend doesn't want to be friends with me anymore? Right? That's the difficulty in these behaviors is it completely draws our attention as parents all the way down the rabbit trail into the direction it doesn't need to be going, right? We start going down the consequences of that for ourselves when really we need to be looking at, okay, why did this even happen? And this has been happening a lot lately. What's going on with this pattern? What could be happening here? So wanting to see if there is a pattern that you can identify and why that might be. As I said earlier, that the mom that was noticing her child was stealing items. So it wasn't so much, it wasn't that the child was constantly stealing the same item. They weren't only stealing jewelry or clothes or things like that, but they were stealing things that belonged to a particular person, to his own mother, to the mother in another home, right? So thinking about that kind of a pattern as well is who are they stealing from? And is there any connection there that could be giving us ideas about what they might be afraid of that could be causing the negative feelings that they're using stealing to avoid? Okay. Some things to keep in mind as well is that there could be a cultural difference. Just to be kind of aware of that, right? That if they've adopted internationally or even through foster care, these kids do not often have possessions, right? They are not used to being anywhere where they had items that were theirs, and those items over there belong to that child, and I can only ask them to use their item, right? The things that we help our American cultured children grow up to learn, right? That this is what sharing looks like and taking turns. And if you want to borrow that, you have to ask permission. And that they didn't have this in the orphanage. They didn't even have possessions to take care of. So if you've got this kind of child in your home, then what is, right, what maybe they just don't understand that value, right? And they aren't even seeing it as stealing, that they're just like, I can just grab whatever is available. If it's sitting on the floor, I can have it. That's how it was at the orphanage. That's how it was at my foster home. So just being mindful, especially if you're more recently that child coming into your home, that some of these behaviors maybe don't mean they're a, kleptomaniac sociopath, right? That instead it's just, they don't know, right? So we just need to focus on teaching and focus on learning that there are boundaries, right, to these different needs and what is going on underneath that behavior of the child. And then also just an abuse history can have some impact in this as well, right? So one of the many, many difficult things about abuse is that children learn that you take what you want, right? That abusers took from them. Abusers have stolen from them and done what they wanted without regard to other people's feelings. And that can teach them similar messaging, unfortunately. So again, that's a place to focus on teaching boundaries and teaching what it looks like to ask for or take from another. And that focus again on the teaching and not just the punishing of the stealing behavior. A couple other thoughts on patterns and things that you might see with these kids if they're stealing food, right? That's one that's pretty common. If they're hoarding, stealing food out of the pantry, they're waking up in the middle of the night to grab something, that coming from some real food insecurity, right, of them and growing up in the environment that they were in, that always being afraid that there won't be something to eat. So an easy way, I'm sure you've heard, to kind of combat any food issues and hoarding issues, keeping a basket of healthy snacks on the counter that child can grab and eat at any time. They can eat them. They can spoil their dinner with the fruit and raisins and crackers and granola bars that you put in that basket, so that they start to learn that fear starts to come down, that there will always be food for them. And then that is going to stop the stealing. But if our response is just to lock the pantry, lock up all the food, put an alarm on their door so if they sneak out at night, make them, toss their room every night to make sure they aren't hiding food somewhere, right? Then we're missing the deeper fear that could maybe be satisfied by, here's a basket of snacks you can have at any time. You don't have to steal them. You don't have to take them back to your room. You can eat them right here. You can leave them here. They're always going to be here. And over time, children start to learn that, takes the fear down, changes the behavior. toys and possessions from a particular sibling. Maybe they're feeling insecure about their place in the family, feeling insecure about their relationship with that sibling. So if we just focus on that behavior, them stealing from their sibling, and they have to make it up to their sibling, but we've missed, my child feels insecure in my family. So what else can I do to help them feel more connected to me, help them feel more connected to their siblings, right? So that's ultimately where we want our focus to be. Are they stealing money? Is this a survival skill, right? From wherever they came from before. They never know if they're going to be on the run, if they're going to be leaving this home, right? If they still don't feel secure in your home, even if they're there permanently, they may not feel that way. And so they're stealing money and keeping and holding on to it so that in case they get back out on the street again, in case they have to go somewhere else, they have something to survive. So being mindful that this could be kind of a survival skill if we're seeing a pattern in what they're stealing, and being able to look and identify what's going on underneath. Okay, location patterns. Again, you're going to see this question at the top. What could be the cause, right? At home, what could they be stressed out about? What could feel stressful in your home? Examine these questions with kindness and honesty to yourself. The environment of your home, there could be something that is making them feel more fear, more insecurity, more stress, or more out of control, right? I can recognize that as a parent. The things that I know that I do when I'm in my own mood and I, snap at my kid, or I don't let them go do something, or the kind of the rules or the reactions that I have to my kids can essentially cause them to actually react worse back to me, right? And I have to be mindful of the way that I'm approaching my child, because this is a two-way relationship. So examine this, even in your home. Is there something that they feel insecure about, something that's causing them to feel out of control that you have the power to change and that you could look at changing? You can make their world much smaller to help them feel more secure. So that kind of means maybe you're hanging out in the living room all the time. Instead of child going into a playroom, going off to their bedroom, and then every time they're sent off to play and you think they're playing in the playroom, they're actually rifling around in your room trying to steal something, right? Instead, if you're keeping them in the living room, keeping them close to you, then they start to learn more security. They don't feel insecure and stressed out, and then they're not trying to steal things to make that feeling go away. So being aware of that doesn't mean you're gonna have to keep that kid next to your side for the next 10 years of your life, right? It is the more effort you can put in right now to helping them feel safe and secure and more connected, even though that's a lot more work on you in this moment, it's going to pay off in the long run. And taking down these negative and difficult behaviors because they're feeling more connected and more secure to you is ultimately where we want our attention and the work to go, right? Do a lot of hard work for a short amount of time instead of a lot of work over a long amount of time. Connection, focus back again on connection, right? Any places where you are having to up those consequences because of some of the stealing that's going on, making sure we are over upping the connection, right? How are you being playful? How are you finding specific times to connect with them? I know all of us will sit here and go, oh my gosh, I do not know how I could give this child any more of my time and attention, right? But there's always a place, right? There's always somewhere you can squeak in 5 more minutes. Maybe it's, again, if you're starting to see some patterns, they always kind of steal after dinner or while you're cooking dinner, right? Can you connect with them for 5 very devoted minutes? Play one quick game, one quick, put the car on the track, play with the dollhouse, whatever it is for 5 minutes before you start cooking dinner. Then they feel more connected and less likely to go and steal. Finding times to focus, especially if it seems like the stealing is focused on one parent over the other, then maybe that parent really needs to up the connection and nurture and connecting with them. Maybe that could help, right? And I'm sure you're doing enough, right? But maybe going overboard can maybe start to take them down. Again, you're not going to have to do it forever. You can come back down to a more normal connection time, right? An amount of time of connection once that insecurity starts to settle. Oh, sorry. At school, again, what could be causing them stress, fear, insecurity, out of control at school? All kinds of things, right? School is hard. This could be coming from teachers, from administrators, from kids in their class, kids not in their class, kids on the playground, in the lunchroom, someone they pass in the hallway, somebody they're romantically interested in, somebody they're friends with, somebody they're not friends with. So many places can be causing fear and stress. And I was just social engagements. What about the schoolwork, right? And what they're being asked to do in their classes. If they're stealing from one particular teacher, are they feeling extreme stress with just that teacher, just in that class? Is that class content really challenging and difficult for them? And so they get really stressed out. And the only way they can calm down is if they steal from their classmate next to them or steal something from the teacher. So being aware of that, try to involve the teacher in becoming a safe person and willing to help with them, giving the teacher, and that can be hard, right? Because if your kid's stealing in class, your teacher's probably not liking them very much, right? And then your teacher may not always be very willing to go above and beyond for that one child because she may not see this the same way that you do. Doing the best you can to explain to her, it's really not about him trying to harm you and take your stuff. This is about him feeling stressed out and being in school, being away from the family. He's new to us. The school year's been hard on him. He's feeling extra stress. We think he's doing this as a way to help him feel better. So we need to redirect him into other ways to express that. Seeing if they're willing to work with you. Okay, I know that can be hard. But if the teacher can say, I know that school can feel really stressful to you sometimes. And when you feel that way, you can, you end up taking things from me or from other students. I want you to know that I'm here to help you. Next time that you feel like taking something, why don't you raise your hand and I'll come over and I'll talk to you and I'll stand next to your desk, or you can come up and stand with me by my desk or talk with me for a moment to try to calm down whenever you're starting to feel really stressed out and you feel like you want to go steal something, right? So you're not going to get in trouble if you come up here and you talk to me and you say, hey, I kind of got that itch. I got that little bug that I want to do right now, right? Kind of come up with a code word for it that can make it a little bit more playful and safe for the child to say, hey, I'm feeling that type of way right now. Then the teacher can try to help step in and be preventative. They're willing to work with you on that. So yeah, are there certain times of day, the class period, can you see any kind of a pattern that can help you understand what they might be stressed out or insecure about? Is this happening at stores, right? So actually stealing from stores, which I know is even more stressful for you as a parent because that is where police can get involved, right? And some bigger things can happen if your child's caught stealing from a store, right? And that can feel very scary to you. And so your reaction out of your own fear is to really jump in and try to curb that child's behavior. Let's up the punishments. Okay, you don't get to go to any more stores anymore because I can't trust you to not steal. So they never get to go anywhere. They just have to stay home and they can't go to any stores ever, right? That is only feeding their feelings of stress and insecurity. So how can we still have consequences, still work out this behavior without adding to that stress and insecurity? How can we find out what it is, right? Are you taking them to Walmart? It always happens at Walmart. Walmart's an overwhelming store. Target's loud. The grocery store, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of things to look at, lots of colors. It's loud, it's music, it's people talking, all kinds of stuff going on in there, right? So if they're feeling really stressed out by that, then that might be causing them to want to steal when they're in those places. So talking with your child, kind of using that similar script, like with the teacher. Hey, buddy, when you go to stores, you can get really overwhelmed or scared, and you have a tendency to stick things in your pockets because I know that can kind of help you feel better when you do that. But I want to help you learn that when you feel overwhelmed or scared, that you can come to me for help. I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you learn this. When we go in the store today, I'm going to keep you really close to me so that I can help you learn how to come to me when you feel stressed out, not to grab something off the shelves and steal it. So you can squeeze my hand, you could put a hand on my arm, you can stand close to me. Maybe you do need to walk holding hands with the child and somebody else is pushing the cart, or so finding ways to drive that back to connection, right? Do you hear that difference, right? And what the focus of what we're trying to do, because there's a way to say, hey, you have to stay close to me because I have to watch you and I have to make sure that you're not stealing anything. How different that sounds to yourself and to the child, then I want to help you be successful. So I'm going to keep you close to me today. And you can squeeze my hand or you can poke my leg every time you feel stressed or you feel worried or you feel anxious or overwhelmed by this store, right? Then I want you to kind of get my attention and I'm going to squeeze your hand right back every time you do that. So that I'm here with you to help you learn how to not steal, right? By putting the focus on, I am here with you. When you're stressed out, come to me. Let me co-regulate you, right? I'm here to help calm you down until your child can learn those skills to be able to internally regulate themselves. You can even practice going into a store and just walking around, right? Holding hands, just walking up and down the aisles to help them just start to feel more comfortable in those kinds of stores, or if that's what's kind of going on, if those are the stressors and the overwhelmed feelings. Give them an agenda to make it all very predictable. Hey, we're going to go to the store today. We're going to get these items. Can you help me find them, right? Or give them a one item. Hey, we're going to get all these things today, but your job is to make sure we don't forget your favorite cereal. So you've got to be watching for when we get to the cereal aisle and you have to tell me, hey, mommy, don't forget, we got to get those Honey Nut Cheerios. You know, kind of make it playful, give them something to focus on to redirect that stress and anxiety that they might be feeling into a task like that can help them be successful, right? And again, it's driving them back to you. They're helping you shop. They're connecting with you through that process instead of you just being hyper fixated, making sure that their hands aren't reaching out to grab something. Give them items they're in charge of. You can tell them what to grab and they've got to grab it and put it in the cart, right? So giving them something to do to help when you guys are in stores, if that's where you're noticing the problem. And then at other people's houses, right? What could be that cause? What's stressing them out? What's fearful? What's feeling insecure? So you might, think about that, right? Do they just feel they feel a lot of social anxiety, feel really overwhelmed being in a new person's house or in someone's house that they're not as familiar with, or just being in anyone's houses in general. Inform the other parent, right? Be careful how you word that, right? So you don't want the other parent, if somebody was like, oh, hey, by the way, my kid loves to steal things, have fun, I'd be like, wait, wait a second. All right, so involve that parent, be mindful in how you're sharing with them. Hey, we're really working on this. You don't have to watch them like a hawk. We're really been working on this, but I've told him if he's feeling any certain way that he can call me and I'll come back and get him, or I'll just be in the other room. Hey, maybe, like normally we would just drop the kids off and let them play. Would you mind if I stayed today just to help my child feel more connected and comfortable, because it's the first time we're in your home, and when he goes somewhere for the first time, he can kind of have these behaviors, and it's not about you, it's not about stealing your stuff, it's just about him trying to find a way to calm down. And I know it sounds silly, but this is what we need to do. Is that okay with you? Maybe you need to be the one that's always inviting children into your home, right? So your child still gets that social interaction, but you're not putting them in that temptation to be at other people's houses, if you've noticed that's where this is always happening. So just starting to wrap up here, we do have, different resources. A lot of my information today came from a couple of these books that are listed here: Beyond Consequences, Logic and Control. They do have a chapter very specific to stealing and other behaviors. So I think these are just really good ones. If you're seeing lots of difficult behaviors in your child, these are books worth investing in. The A to Z of Therapeutic Parenting. Always the Connected Parent is a great one. You may have read Connected Child during your adoption process. The Connected Parent is kind of the next volume in that series almost. So it takes a lot of the Connected Parent or Connected Child principles, and then it's co-written by an adoptive mom, Lisa Qualls, that makes it really practical. So even if you've read Connected Child, I would still recommend the Connected Parent. And then I also want to mention that we do have a coaching program. So if you're really seeing significant issues with your child in this area of stealing, you can't find the pattern, you're not really understanding why they're doing this because they're stressed out, and you think, no, they're just doing it because they don't know what else to do, and it's compulsive and I don't know what to do about them. Would love to talk with you. Set up maybe some coaching services for you guys. That's 4 weeks of meeting with a staff coach to focus in on these behaviors and different things that you could be doing and changing in your parenting or adding into your parenting that can maybe help your child and give you ways of handling what you're seeing happening with them in regards to stealing. So my contact information is here on the screen. You can email me, reach out anytime to either just talk through this one time, set up coaching. We want to get you help and support because we know these difficult behaviors, things that we've been talking about in this series, as well as stealing, can really disrupt your relationship with the child. And we want to help you fight back against that because we think there are ways for that to happen and for your child to heal. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will be doing, our next webinar is in August on something that is not coming to my mind right now. So I'm so sorry, but you can see that on our website, nightlight.org/PACC. If you go to the adoptive parent page, the sign up for that next webinar is in August, and then I'll be sending out a newsletter for the fall webinars. They are every other month, and you can find what the future topics are going to be there once we get those posted. Thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you later.